Godfrey.
The First Elden Lord.
He's a pinnacle of strength and ability and discipline. Godfrey's achievements throughout the story is well known, also well displayed in my opinion, because honestly we learn more about Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, than Radagon, the King Consort, the second Elden Lord. But I would say Radagon actually plays more of a story in terms of when we get into the Lands Between. But that's off topic. We're going to talk about Lord Godfrey and a character analysis that also leads to more of a masterclass in terms of mindset, leadership, strength, and discipline, also willpower. Godfrey is a good representation of strength and willpower. Honestly, it's an understatement saying he's a pinnacle of strength in terms of humanity's strength. Now, let's go into who Godfrey actually is. Like I said before, Godfrey is the first Elden Lord. Excuse me, gotta get some chopsticking. But Godfrey is the first Elden Lord, also the husband of Queen Marika. When the Erdtree started, he had the Age of Plenty, from what I know. And he also was there way before he was Horlu. That's his like true self, persona, anything like that. So basically Horlu and Godfrey the same person. So I'll refer to them as such depending on what event or something I'm talking about, or what trait I'm really talking about, and which one defines it more. But yes, he is also was the leader of the armies back then, the armies of gold, the champion of conquest. And the biggest event that is for Godfrey, from what we know in terms of that influences us, is that he was banished and became the first Tarnish. Basically, the Tarnish is what your main character is. You're a character, you. He comes back as Godfrey again, then you battle him, and then he becomes Horlu because he kills Sarash, I guess. But Sarash and him are basically one person, basically grafting a beast regent on his back to basically become Godfrey. But Horlu embraces the raw warrior spirit. So just to rough down and give you a little summary of who Godfrey is. Godfrey is the first Elden Lord, husband of Queen Marika, and conqueror for the Golden Order. Then the Horlu is the raw warrior spirit of him, basically a Highlander before he became Godfrey, and then after still has Highlander blood. And basically he's the pinnacle of it. I think he's the only bloodline I know that actually uses the storm pretty well, in terms of like in the Lands Between, because obviously the Horns and all those people and stuff like that use the storm and stuff like that. But he's the only person I know that actually used that. Although I don't think he ever uses it though. So pretty lore complications there. But we're not here for that. But we're gonna talk about Horlu's mindset as well, in terms of how he carries himself and how you could take inspiration from both sides, and also how you can disregard some of the stuff, because it has some pros and cons. There is some big cons to Godfrey and Horlu, or Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. So we're going to talk about Godfrey's mindset. Godfrey's mindset, before we start, Godfrey's mindset and Horlu's mindset does overlap because they are the same person, but I'll distinguish both of them for certain categories and certain key points I bring up. But Godfrey's mindset is what you should really look at and take, like that saying and that idol. That like saying and mindset, like Bruce Lee, like I said for the Sir Ansbach video, how you take what's good about something and add it to your own and discard the bad things. Or for you, anything could be good and anything could be bad depending on the person and depending who you are. But that's what you want to do with Godfrey's mindset, as before with Sir Ansbach. But Godfrey's mindset, the key traits you have to really look at is his discipline. Godfrey has a sense of discipline. A lot of people see him as a barbarian, which he is a barbarian, but he never really describes himself as a barbarian. He always describes himself as a warrior. And to be a warrior, you need discipline, a strong sense of discipline. Not only that, he chooses discipline over comfort. If you could tell about certain implications about certain characters, for example, I don't know if it's his first son, but one of his legitimate sons, I say in quotations because there's actually a good chance that Godwyn the Golden is not his son. But let's talk about Godwyn. There's a lot of implications showing that Godwyn is actually not, fully disciplined, especially when it comes to his own character. There's a lot of different things going on with his bloodline and the Golden lineage that supposedly is descended from Godwyn, or not Godwyn. Well, yeah, Godwyn, but Godfrey. You could tell that Godwyn has a sense of like sleeping around. Basically, his bloodline seems very all over the place. When it comes to Morg or Morgoth, Morgoth. Why I say Morg? Morg and Morgoth. You can tell their bloodline strong, solidified. Just straight up, you could tell they're the descendant of Godfrey. Obviously, we never meet Godwyn, and maybe Godwyn had a little, Godwyn had a little bit of blood from Godfrey. Who knows? But I think he's more of a alchemy. I think Godwyn's more of an alchemy mix-up of artificial life. But let's not talk about Godwyn. Godwyn's a whole completely different subject, and it's honestly hard to create a video about him. But maybe we will attempt to in the future. But why I was talking about that is because Godfrey instills a sense of discipline, and it seems to carry over for his children. Although we don't really know for Morg, but for Morgoth, it has that discipline where it's discipline over comfort. Hello, ladies and gents. This is actually the second recording session. I did go to the store, so just a few snacks. But we're gonna talk about the next category. I talked about discipline over comfort. I don't know if I finished it or not, but we're gonna move over to the next category, which is relentless willpower. And willpower is a great asset and trait to have depending on the character. Now, Godfrey was a warrior, but he was also many other things. The Lord of the Battlefield, and that might be correlate to a warrior, but it also correlates to a set of like a ruler image. He had relentless willpower to the point where he had a whole conquest for all these great warriors and champions from many different pantheons before he was even Godfrey too. When he was Horlu, he defeated Sarash, and then I'm pretty sure Sarash offered servitude, and then the whole Godfrey thing happened, and then they got grafted together, and now he's Beast Regent and stuff like that. But he also fought many people. I also believe that he invaded Farum Azula. Farum Azula is the home of the ancient dragons, so I'm pretty sure he invaded Farum Azula. And then he also led the battles outside of the lands between on the March of the Charnish. So he definitely have relentless willpower, and relentless willpower is a great trait to have, even if you're not a warrior yourself. It can even relate to warrior traits as well, because I'm a mixed martial artist, and if you do mixed martial arts, having relentless willpower is the greatest asset you can ever attain, especially in mixed martial arts or competitively, or even when it comes to time to when the lights go high and everything like that, and things really the bucket gets kicked over, and all these crazy things happening, and God forbid, knock on wood, God forbid that you actually need to use your strength to protect your family or something like that. So relentless willpower can provide in any situation, honestly. And we're gonna move to the next trait, which is embracing struggle. Elden Ring has a sense of embracing struggle. Almost the whole story is about embracing struggle in some way or some form, but Godfrey has really embraced struggle, mainly because his primal nature. Godfrey has a duality when it comes to nature: his Lord self and his primal self. I honestly think his primal self is his true self, although I believe you have a sense of nature, but you also have a sense of action. So your actions really do define you. Just like we're talking about Lord Godfrey, technically he is also Horlu. But he was embracing struggle when it came to his duality in terms of his nature, and a lot of people do struggle with that. A lot of people do struggle with that sense of nature or that sense of duality. And embracing struggle is honestly very good and very bad depending on the situation, but most of the time I would say about 80% of the time is pretty good, because you're pushing past your limits, pushing beyond limits that you set for yourself, or you believe that is natural limits to yourself. Is really not. You can really prevail in any category, and this is one of the categories of embracing struggle to surpass your nature. Is honesty one of the biggest pros you can have in anything, especially when it comes to business, or it comes to your own mindset, or it comes to self-growth especially, because a lot of self-growth actually stem from natural stigmata and natural sense of nature and sense of your own individual reality. What I mean by that is exactly that sometimes, most of the time, mental disorders and stuff like that actually come from our own emotions, and they come from our own how we view ourselves, our own point of view, our own sense of pride and egotistical and all that stuff. We do inflict damage on ourselves, especially mentally, and embracing struggle is going to help you get out of that or help prevent it. Obviously there's a lot more to it depending on what you're actually talking about, but in the rough guideline, that's very true. Now, the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to his key traits is that Godfrey is one man with a mission. He is one man with a mission. There's one thing we can show in anything he has done, whatever he was Godfrey, Horlu, whether he helped Queen Margot become a god, or what he fought against the ancient dragons at Fair Missoula, or when he led the march out of the Tarnish, or he led the march out of the lands between with the Tarnish, when he was fighting these many battles, when he was, like, you know, being the first Elden Lord. Well, the first, Placidusek is considered the first Elden Lord, but when he was being the first Elden Lord, there was one thing, even when he comes to his own duality of nature, for example, his barbarian self or his warrior self, like I guess they're both warriors in their own sense, but Horlu and Godfrey, one thing that stays really clear is purpose. He had a clarity of purpose. Godfrey Horlu had a sense of purpose 100% of the way. He never lost himself when it came to his purpose. Now, we don't know any of the nitty-gritty details about certain events and stuff like that, so, you know, he could have got doubts and dismotivated or anything like that. You know, everyone's humans in a certain degree, especially when it comes to Elden Ring. But, you know, from what we know, he always had a sense of clarity of purpose. He always tested himself against worthy foes. He always knew that he wanted to fight. He wanted battle. He was the lord of the battlefield. There was no sense of denying that, or no sense of discomfort towards that goal or anything like that. And then even when he achieved that goal, he strived higher. So let's take a step back and realize what is actually the real life applicants to this, the real life applications to this. One is self-growth. Godfrey and Horlu, no matter where the point in the standpoint, or no matter where you want to pin his story at, whether that be when he was Horlu, when he was with the Horn set, or when he was Godfrey in terms of the Age of Plenty, or when he was on the March of the Tarnish outside the lands between, he was always evolving in some way, whether that be his craft as a warrior, or whether that be his lordship, or whether that be him returning back to his primal nature and leading the clans of the Badlands, or establishing his own clan, establishing new families and new ties. He was always evolving. He was never sitting in the same spot for a certain amount of time. And even when he did, usually because other people stopped him from evolving, whether that be Queen Mark or anything of the sort. He was always evolving. So self-growth, always evolving. Another thing will be for business, because my channel is about business. So we're going to talk about Godfrey, how he's basically a conqueror. He's a world conqueror. And that has a sense of business to a certain degree. He built the Golden Order. No matter how you look at it, Radagon and Queen Margot played a big part. Everyone else also played a big part. The demigods and other smaller people in the story and stuff like that. But he was the first Elden Lord for the Golden Order. Placidusek was the first, but he was the first for the Golden Order. He built the foundations of that empire. Building the foundations of that empire requires a lot of skills, traits, and lordship. I know he had the Beast Regent Sarash on his back, but Sarash, I guess Sarash and Horlu are the same person in my eyes. So, they both rebuilt, built, and continue to expand their empire. And that requires a sense of dedication and require a sense of traits that relate to lordship. And lordship has sense of leadership, and that leadership can be spread into all categories, whether it be school or career or college or, you know, internship or, you know, relationship. All the sense of leadership can prevail in any category and really show its true colors when you follow the example of Lord Godfrey. Another thing was his true I guess implication is his mindset. True power comes from knowing that who you are and refining it relentlessly. That is what makes Godfrey special. Now, if you quick disclaimer, I am looking for my notes, as I always say at each video. I just like to say it to really like tell you guys that, you know, I'm over here trying to get you the right things, because if I was just going off my own script, you know, this is my script, I created it, nothing like that. But if I was just going off, if I went off script, we will be here for a long time. And the last video was 30 minutes. I actually did not want it to be 30 minutes. I tried to reach 20 and under, so that's the goal of this video, although I think we are going to pass 20 minutes over, but that's a little off topic. Let's go back into the mindset of Lord Godfrey. Like I said before, I'm gonna restate what I have here on my notes. Is true power comes from knowing who you are and refining it relentlessly. 100% true. Like I said, Godfrey had the clarity of purpose, and that clarity of purpose was led to willpower, led to lordship, led to strength, led to him being the lord of the battlefield, or whatever you're looking for: status, money, power, title, anything like that. Oh, status and title are the same thing, but you know, image. All those are not things I recommend chasing fully. You know, it can be a byproduct of what you want. Like I said, Horlu had a sense of purpose when it came to the battlefield. He was a warrior. He was a champion. He wanted this, and he got that. You know, he wanted battle. He was crazy. But there is a sense of crazy when it comes to everybody, right? The most successful people always have a sense of disconnect from regular people, is because they have this weird sense of craziness to them. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't matter how calm it is, you know, no matter how much they have that sriracha on their back, they have this weird nature where you can tell they're a little crazy. But that's a little off topic as well. But those are the real life implications. And for this first category, now we're going to go into a little subcategory where I talk about Godfrey's power and presence, and how you can imply that to your own real life. What makes him powerful? Obviously, he's extremely strong, warrior, Highland warrior, tarnish, First Elden Lord, all that stuff. Everyone, that's the surface level. We're going to talk about his controlled rage. That's the first category. His controlled rage. Not mindless, but intentional. You know, when he like goes into the second phase during his boss fight, he rips his shirt off. Well, people who never played Elden Ring before will have like, it'll be like, what the frick? You ripped the shirt off. But yeah, he ripped his shirt off. And he called himself warrior. But you never see him like, he had this bestial instinct. Don't get me wrong. He had that bestial instinct. He had that barbarian instinct. He had that strong, primal instinct. But he was never like straight up like like a monster, or like a straight up beast. Like this is straight up like mindless beast, you know, like a bear attacking or something like that. He was never like that. He had a sense of coordination. He had a sense of intentional combat, and that's what really makes him different. He was not mindless, but it was intentional. He released his nature on purpose. He knew what he was getting himself into. Another thing that makes him powerful is his leadership. He led the armies of the Erd Tree. Pretty self-explanatory. Led the armies of the Erd Tree. That requires a sense of leadership. That requires a sense of adoration from his men and obviously his soldiers. And then the next thing we want to talk about is fearless confrontation. He never backed down from a fight. I'm pretty sure he never backed down from a fight. And there's so many stories about him in these battles and all these crazy things that happened to him. I'm 100% sure that he never backed down from a fight. Now, this has some pros and cons. Obviously, you want to be strategic about your fights, and you know, fights can translate to many other things, whether it be business or anything like that. You know, you don't want to choose the right outcomes, or you don't want to choose the bad outcomes. You want to usually choose the outcomes that benefit you and all this other stuff. So take it with a grain of salt for this category, the fearless confrontation. You know, that's what makes them powerful, and you can use that to your own advantage, but make sure you play your cards carefully. But you know, one thing you want to talk about is actually pain. Godfrey handles pain very well. He never ever shows a sense of, you know, not a sense of like, oh, he doesn't show his pain. He pretty much show his pain in many different things. For example, when he enters his boss arena, he's like holding his son Morga. He's like, oh, Morga, it's been a while. You know, sure, that you could tell that it was a sense of pain when it came to him. But you know, he never let his pain control him. For sure, he never let it control him. He also showed his pain. I think to become someone who's powerful, you must also show, you know, your pain. A lot of people like to say, oh, you know, you hide your pain and hide your suffering. No, being a strong person requires you to actually show that you're suffering, that you're pain, but it also allows you to prevail over them. So let's talk about the real life reflections when it came to these three categories. The three categories I was talking about is controlled rage, leadership, fearless confrontation, and then the bonus category of pain. But let's talk about the real life reflections, as I said before, which is to channel your inner rage for motivation and not destruction. You notice that when Godfrey releases his rage and his primal instincts and all this other stuff, it never is a sense of destruction towards it. It has a sense of like motivation, a sense of discipline, a sense of like controlled environment. He knew what he was doing, and you can apply that. You can apply that to almost anything. That sense of controlled environment, that sense of motivation. Basically, channel your inner rage for motivation, not destruction. The next category we're going to talk about is to lead with clarity. When you lead with clarity, it gives the people that are following you a sense of clarity as well. For example, your teams if you're running a business, or example, your projects in school when you have a team members and all those other stuff, or your clubs, or you know, work or career, you know, whether you're in a management position or you know you're doing something, anything that revolves around you leading. If you lead with a sense of clarity, the people that follow you will also have a sense of clarity, but also a sense of strength. And strength is what you need, especially when it comes to the nitty-gritty stuff of different teams and projects and all this other crazy thing that comes with leadership. Strength and clarity. Another category we're going to talk about is face your fear, don't avoid it. Exactly. Godfrey always had fearless confrontation, and now, like I said, take that with a grain of salt, but you should always face your fear and don't avoid it, unless it's something really traumatic. And even then, you should try to prevail over it. You know, you don't want it to hold you back. But growth happens through conflict, not comfort. And that's 100% true. If there's one thing you can take from this video, conflict is how growth in evolution happens. That's how you evolve as a character, as a person. Not through comfort. But that's the real life reflections for this category. Now we're going to talk about some common questions that come up with Lord Godfrey. The first common question would be, isn't Lord Godfrey just a barbarian? No. And yes, you're technically right, but you're technically not wrong. Barbarian is a word that you really would use for, I guess, the sense of like a Viking, or like, you know, barbarian was mainly used. A lot of people think of barbarian as a word they use to describe Vikings or people who are more tribal. So barbarian is the wrong word, but you're not here for a history lesson. But a brute, I guess, is the correct word. But no, I think he was more of a strategic leader. Sure, that came from Beast Regent Sarash and all those other things, but he's a warrior at the end of the day. He was the lord of the battlefield. That comes with a sense of strategic leadership. Doesn't matter how you look at it. You can be the biggest brute out there, but if you're the lord of the battlefield and fought countless enemies and have this tremendous amount of experience, you have a sense of strategic leadership. It doesn't matter how you look at it. It doesn't matter how beast-like you are. He had a sense of experience throughout generations, throughout decades, and throughout anything. He's been around for a long time. So, it doesn't matter how you look at it. He had a sense of strategic leadership. And he had a sense of duality as well, control and chaos. So it almost had a sense of balance to him. But you know, there's a bunch of things that can come from a brute. I would say he's a brute, but not in the way you're thinking of, like, you know, straight up barbarian. Oh, barbarian is the wrong word, but straight up brute, mindless, you know, ogre type, like a big stick bonk. But no, he's not like that. He has plenty traits that make him who he is. But the second question would be, how does this relate to normal people? As I said before, there's a bunch of things that relate to them, different traits that you can pick up and apply to your own thing, whether that be career, school, mixed martial arts, you know, anything, passions, hobbies, purpose, you know, there's a bunch of things. But what I have here is that you don't need a crown. You need the ownership of your path, or ownership over your path. Well, in the lore implications, you know, Queen Marika could have been using him. I'm pretty sure they had some type of like, you know, relationship, although the seduction from the DLC and all this other stuff. The people who don't really know Elden Ring too much would be like, what the frick are you talking about? But I'm pretty sure if you're watching this video, unless you're like a big fan of me, I'm pretty sure you're a big fan of Elden Ring and Lord Godfrey yourself too. But ownership over your path. No matter how you look at it, Godfrey had his story is about a sense of resilience, a sense of willpower, a sense of strength, and comeback energy. Whether that be comeback energy in terms of like his battles, you know, I'm pretty sure he has some tough battles, or him returning back to the lands between and doing the final showdown. That takes a sense of energy that a lot of people do not have. But what does his transformation mean? It comes from noble Elden Lord King, wherever you want to describe it, to primal beast. Basically embracing his full self. And embracing your full self doesn't have to exactly mean bad things. A lot of people like to hide their true self, but sometimes embracing your true self and sometimes changing your true self. A lot of people like to say, oh, don't change your true self. But sometimes you need to. Sometimes, you know, you can't get the things you want by being like that. And Horlu and Godfrey is a good example of that. But you know, he never, Horlu and Godfrey never let that stop them. He let them refine and direct them in a sense of passion and clarity of purpose, and that's something you should always strive for and always try to achieve. Now we're going to talk about tips to become like Lord Godfrey, or tips to acquire some of his mindset and acquire some of his traits and acquire some of his energy, his raw primal energy to use for your own well-being. Main thing I'm gonna talk about before I go into my list, because I don't have it on my list, but one thing you gotta really look for is that if you're really trying to come closer to Godfrey, you must understand what a warrior is. And I highly recommend to, you know, give me a minute, I'm gonna go get the belt. Oh, that sounds weird, but you know, I'm gonna go get the belt. Hold up. There you go. I am a blue belt, so I'm a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, mixed martial arts, all that stuff. But, you know, here it is. In order to really understand what a warrior is, you must have a sense of combat, battle, no matter how you look at it. And the best way to ever reach the bridge in terms of the modern day, because, you know, you can't be a warrior and go conquer the damn world, you know, not anymore, but is mixed martial arts. If you want to understand the traits that Horlu and Godfrey had, mixed martial arts is one of the best ways to actually embrace those things. Because if a mixed martial artist looked at Godfrey's character, he'll understand that a lot of his character actually stems from battle. And battle gives you a sense of traits that really you can't find anywhere else. Like I said, Bruce Lee, Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, all these amazing people. And of course you have the more modern day people, the modern champions, like the UFC champions, the boxing champions, all those are the modern people. My favorite being Mighty Mouse, one of the greatest mixed martial arts legends ever. But to actually understand a lot of the traits, I highly recommend to do mixed martial arts. Now if it's not for you, then it's not for you. But once you do mixed martial arts, you'll become a sense of like that warriorship, that being a warrior. But you'll start to understand the small things about Godfrey, and you'll be like, you just acquired them over your journey of a mixed martial artist. But that's a little off topic. Let's go back into what I have here to become like Lord Godfrey. One is build discipline. Train your mind and body daily. Small habits, consistent pressure. Really good. Whether that be passions for working out or lifting weights and all this other stuff. Really good. Training your mind and body, you know, no matter how you look at it, Godfrey trained his mind, even though a lot of people like to call him a brute, you know, he's a muscle man, whatever you want to call him. But his experience trained his mind. His experience sharpened his mind. But another thing is to accept exile. When you're down, see it as see it as your proving ground, because a lot of people can disregard you. You know, Godfrey doesn't really have that, but you know, when he became tarnished, a lot of people disregarded him, even though he was the first Elden Lord. But when you're down, show it as your proving ground to yourself, because a lot of people can feel when you get discarded and a lot of bad things happen to you, and a lot of people see you in a different light now as they did before, it can really hurt somebody. So use it as your proving ground for your own well-being. And you can do that, you get a sense of confidence that will stay with you forever. Another thing is your moral code. Godfrey had a warrior's code, you know, his battle and all this other stuff, Lord of the Battlefield, all that crazy thing, the implications of that, the clarity of that purpose, of that idea, of that moral code. Once you have a moral code, you get a sense of clarity or purpose, but you must believe in it. If you don't truly believe in that moral code or any code, it doesn't matter what it is, any code, you would not have that sense of clarity or purpose. Obviously, you're going to have to convince yourself, and the only way to truly convince yourself is through experience. Another thing is pursue worthy challenges. Playing small, stop playing small, basically. Don't play small. You know, you can start off small, get the small wins, but, you know, when you, truly to grow, the challenge must be in order to truly grow, the challenges must get stronger and harder, more difficult over time. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over and expect you to grow. Now, you can do repetitive actions and get better at something, but in order to truly grow, you must test yourself at the biggest stage each time. And next thing will be balance, control, and chaos. Everyone has this. Don't suppress your ambition, but channel it. But also don't let it consume you. A lot of people let their ambitions consume them. A lot of them let their ambitions die. A lot of them let their ambitions get lazy. You know, for example, a great example would be like the self-help, self-growth type thing. A lot of people want to do that. They watch motivational things all the time, and that's all they do. Consume motivational stuff, and that's it. They let their ambition get lazy, and then some people let their ambitions die, and some people let their ambitions consume them, doing things that they usually wouldn't do, that goes against their own nature. But let's do a quick summary in terms of what I was actually talking about for the tips to become like Lord Godfrey. The first one is build discipline. The second one is accept exile. The third one is define your code, whether that be a warrior's code, a moral code, or anything like that. The next one will be pursue worthy challenges. Don't play small. And then the last one is the balance, control, and chaos. All very good points. Now, let's talk about a rough category in terms of what it means for the channel. What I mean by that is like what I represent for the channel and what the channel actually represents. We're going to talk about two categories, business and self-growth. Business. How does Godfrey relate to business? A lot of people will see that it's almost extremely hard to connect the two, but let's talk about Godfrey and how he connects to business. Leadership, obviously, we want the whole rant about leadership, but let's talk about him as a persona, and him as a character. No matter how you look at it, experience is king, and Godfrey is the pinnacle of that. Godfrey is the pinnacle of strength and experience. No matter how you look at it, he is the most experienced warrior that has come in the lands between and even before that. So experience. Use experience to sharpen your business, no matter what it is, no matter how small, how big, how complex, how easy, difficult, doesn't matter. Experience is king. There's Godfrey and business, the one connection you can bring between those two is experience. Experience. Another thing would be self-growth, evolution. Like I talked about this earlier, roughly. Evolution. He's never ever like in a sense of a comfort level where he's just sitting around. You almost get that with Radagon, but Radagon has a different sense of strength and a different sense of clarity. But Radagon's age is a lot more, I would say, disconnected than Godfrey. So you can take that with a grain of salt and see how, you know, which one you view. I always view Godfrey as the better Elden Lord, because Radagon, no matter how you look at it, Radagon had his issues and had his problems. We'll talk about Radagon in the future, but Radagon, he has his strength. Don't get me wrong, he has his strengths, but he also has a lot of cons to him too. But yeah, evolution. So let's talk about another category. This category we're going to talk about is Godfrey's flaw and dark side. Yes, the cons to Godfrey's mindset, the cons to Godfrey's character and his mindset, and how it can apply to you. Another thing is potential pitfalls. We're going to talk about how Godfrey's like image and what traits you bring from him can actually cause some bad things. Every mindset, persona, character, traits you give, what the hell I'm talking about? Brain fart. oh, you acquire will have some pros and cons. There's pros and cons to each situation, each trait, each characteristics, each attribute. It doesn't matter. That's just how the world works. There's always two sides to everything, duality. But let's talk about the first one, which is over attachment to identity. He struggled with purpose once the conquest ended. Yes, once that whole thing ended, Godfrey lost a hue in his eye. Not because, you know, he got grace taken away, but I'm pretty sure if he stuck around, he wouldn't be the same man he was before. Another thing is suppressing himself too long. When he suppressed himself for so long, when he became Horlu again in the Lands Between, you know, and no matter how you look at it, he became a warrior once more outside the Lands Between, but he never took Sarash off his back. So yes, he was Horlu outside the Lands Between, but he was also still Godfrey in a sense because he has Sarash on his back. But when he releases his bestial nature, his primal nature, it emerges so violently. And yes, it was intentional, and yes, it's controlled, but honestly, he suppressed himself for so long. That's probably why he lost to us in the Elden Ring story and when we fought him. Honestly, I guarantee you, if he came back as Horlu, and you know, honestly, the biggest thing I was really thinking about, this is a little off topic, just for lore reasons and me being a fan of Elden Ring. When we see the intro of him in the beginning in the cinematics, basically, it was like Horlu, and he looked like Horlu, like, you know, he wasn't wearing a shirt or anything. Okay, now that come off as weird, but he looked like Horlu, but he still has Sarash on his back. I really wonder if I really wish we got a Horlu and Sarash, like, combination of the two. Damn motorcycle just passed by. But I really wish we got that, honestly. We could have saw Horlu and Sarash as the same person, like in terms of like how the cinematic was, but I'm not really sure how that'll play out. And I wish like that's how it started. Like, you know, I know he was Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and then he returned back and he was gonna stand before the Elden Ring and all that other stuff, but I really wish it was a little different. But that's a little off topic. Let's talk about the next category, which is single focus mindset. Great for battle, bad for peace. You can really take that very self-explanatory. It really is self-explanatory. When you have a single-minded pursuit of something, once you acquire it or once it's gone, you know, whether that may be changes over time or anything like that, you kind of lose that sense of purpose. So make sure you avoid that. How to avoid them, which is I have that here, which leads to the next category, you know, how to avoid them, all this stuff. Have multiple sense of purposes, not just one mission. Very self-explanatory. Check your emotional health regularly. Don't suppress it. Very self-explanatory. Evolve your mindset with seasons of life. Warrior in youth, strategic in maturity. This usually comes from experience. So, pretty self-explanatory. So, I'm going to leave you with some closing thoughts, right? I have here that Godfrey was just not a warrior. He was a metaphor for your strength, your losses, your returns. Study him, not just to win fights, but to win yourself. Pretty self-explanatory. Now, is there anything I want to say before this video ends? This video is going to be tremendously long. About Godfrey. Godfrey is my favorite character. And if you didn't know, because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna show a clip of him, like, you know, I have an intro clip where it says like, oh, Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and he stomped his foot down. But this is Godfrey. This is Godfrey. And he's a big representation. This is Sarash. I don't know if you guys can see pretty well. The lion on his back is Sarash. He's Godfrey. Godfrey is my favorite character. And he's a big inspiration for me in many different categories. And I connect with him on a fundamental level because I am a mixed martial artist. And that's the last thing I want to leave you guys here. Mixed martial arts gives you a sense of traits as a warrior, as a teacher, as a student, and I highly recommend it. One of the best things I've ever done in my whole life, and would never regret doing it at all, no matter what comes from it. So mixed martial arts, you get closer to Godfrey, and you get closer to embodying what actually a warrior is. And that's the last thing I'm gonna leave you guys with. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoy. This video was tremendously long. I'm gonna edit and figure out and make it more smooth, basically. But Godfrey is an amazing character, and I just touched the surface on him. Just like Sir Ansbach, I just touched the surface on both of them because how you look at it, Elden Ring lore is so expansive and it can be viewed in many different ways. People see Godfrey differently than I do. So one day we can, you know, 100% agree on is that he was a true warrior, in my opinion. So, you know, I hope you guys enjoyed this character analysis once again. Thank you guys for the support lately, and I hope you guys enjoy. If you guys missed the last video about Sir Ansbach, the video will be right here. One thing about this video though is that it has sunlight, so sorry, forgive me that it has sunlight, but still a really good video to put in the background. So, thank you guys for watching. Check out the Sir Ansbach video.